I forgot.
Oh, you want restart? Okay. Do over. Yay. April 20th, 1999, Columbine High School.
Littleton, Colorado.
April 16th, 2007, Virginia Tech College.
Blacksburg, Virginia.
December 14th, 2012, Sandy Hook Elementary.
Newtown, Connecticut.
But this is the one that started them all.
January 29th, 1979, Grove, Cleveland Elementary, San Carla, California.
On that tragic morning, 16-year-old Brenda Spencer took out her Ruger 22 caliber long rifle, a gift from her father, and loaded 32 rounds, completely oblivious to the crisis that would soon be unfolding. Principal Burton Wagg unlocks the gated front entrance of his beloved Cleveland Elementary School, waiting to greet the kids, something he always did. The first shot seals the fate of the shooter and the principal. As the gun smoke cleared and the danger eliminated, a small 16-year-old redhead reveals, "I don't like Mondays. This livens up the day." Thank you all for joining us as we introduce Brenda Spencer, the grandmother of school shootings, Unforgiven and Alone.
Ugh. Unforgiven and Alone. That is definitely a straight to the feels. How many of us have ever felt that?
And Brenda felt it and still does so strongly that she used scarification to put it on her body.
Wow.
It was around 8 a.m. on Monday, January 29th, 1979, that 16-year-old Brenda Spencer loaded her Ruger 22 semi-automatic rifle, positioned herself in the front window of her home, directly across from the Cleveland Elementary School. Through the telescopic sight, Brenda fired the first shot, wounding Cam Miller. And Cam was easy to see by his dark blue shirt, which incidentally ended up being Brenda's favorite color. Principal Wagg is shot in the chest as he and a teacher, Daryl Barnes, attempted to get children to safety. Gatia Patton from her classroom heard the popping noises and thought it was firecrackers or a new toy one of the children had gotten for Christmas. If you're not used to gunfire, you will think it's firecrackers or something like that. But if you're used to gunfire, you know exactly what a gun sounds like. While looking out her classroom window, she sees Principal Wagg fall to the ground, the front of his dress shirt turning red. The carefully measured shots continued as Officer Robert Robb arrived on scene to assist other law enforcement that had just arrived. When he is struck in the shoulder, the bullet nicks his jugular and lodges itself in his spine, creating a career-ending injury.
Wow.
56-year-old custodian Mike Suchar is hit by a fatal bullet as he ushered kids to safety. Police were able to block Brenda's shots by moving a garbage truck directly in front of the school gate. Simultaneously, San Diego police evacuate the 300 grade school children out the back of the school. Neighbors are instructed to stay away from windows and stay inside. When law enforcement found these children, they were huddled together. Some were bleeding, and all of them were terrified, alongside a wall. After 36 rounds had been fired, 2 killed and 8 injured, Brenda barricades herself in her house. 6 hours of police negotiations work on getting Brenda to surrender, but to no avail. Reporters began cold calling the phone numbers of the neighbors, finally reaching Brenda. When asked by the Evening Tribune reporter why she shot at the school kids, she pipes off, "I don't like Mondays. This livens up the day." This infamous saying spawned into all types of multimedia projects. Upon the promise and reception of a Burger King meal, Brenda stepped out of her home and right into American history. This shows the mentality of a 16-year-old shooter that after 6 hours is hungry enough to come out on the promise of a fast food meal.
My
What are your thoughts?
my first thought is historically. Okay, so there's two avenues here. Historically, school shooters have always been male.
Yes, she's actually the only female.
And two, the fact that she is she's 16 years old, so she's already kind of getting those hormones, the maternal instinct, and for her to be shooting at children says that there is some sort of disconnect between her and her maternal instinct. What happened to this poor girl? Like, what kind of abuse did she suffer that she sees these children getting dropped off by their parents in the morning and hates them?
We're going to get into that right now. Brenda is charged as an adult and pleads guilty to 2 counts of murder and the lesser charge of assault with a deadly weapon, instead of 9 counts of attempted murder. On April 4th, 1980, the day after Brenda turns 18, she is sentenced to concurrent sentences of 25 to life. By her first parole hearing, Brenda Spencer had received her GED and had been taught mechanics and was forklift certified at the California Institution for Women in Chino, California. Brenda Spencer has gone before the parole board first in 1993, telling the board that she wanted to commit suicide by cop. As well, Brenda made claims that she had been drinking whiskey, popping unidentified pills, and smoking PCP-laced marijuana. But before you blame those very strong chemicals, her toxicology at the time, in 1979, did not show any drugs or alcohol in her system. In 2001, Brenda reveals to the parole board that Wally Spencer, her father, was physically and sexually abusive. She told the board that Wally would touch her genitals and lay on top of her, eventually sodomizing her digitally. The news of Brenda being forced to share a mattress on the bedroom floor with her father, along with the abuse, was received by a skeptical parole board chairman. What are your thoughts on that? They're skeptical. Why would they be skeptical?
I don't know. I think that the fact that, I mean, she shared a bed with her father at the age of 16 years old, that just, without any of the other news, it's like, oh, wait, what? No, not appropriate. It's not appropriate at all. And
Mm-mm.
my first thought is that there is sexual abuse going on just from that knowledge, knowing that that
And
is happening, that they're sleeping
when
together on the same bed.
right. And when Wally Spencer is interviewed finally, after he finally grants an interview, he says, "Well, no, that's not accurate. We shared a bedroom, but she had her own bed and I had mine." But now eyewitness accounts from Brenda's mom, Dorothy Dot Spencer, was there was only one mattress
Hmm.
and it was on the floor of this dirty house.
Right. I mean, just the whole, she lied about the drugs.
Mhm,
She was the I think the reason she lied about the drugs is she did not want to relive any experiences and have to tell anybody what was really going on, so she was trying to blame it on something else. I did this because I was high, not because I'm suffering and this is happening to me.
mhm,
And so she was trying to create a different story where she didn't have to relive the abuse that she was going through.
I agree. And I believe the skepticism from the parole board is because it took her from 1979 to 2001 to tell anybody about this sexual and physical abuse.
Mm,
But that doesn't mean they
some women
were trying to
never
say, well, she
say
was
it.
making it.
Some
Yeah.
women never admit it. And in fact, I'm more skeptical of somebody that immediately comes out and says first thing.
Mm.
To me, that's more questionable than somebody that takes years, because extreme abuse you may never admit to.
And up until his death in 2016, Wally visited his daughter every Saturday. He would make the 5-hour journey from Santa Carla up this way to Chino to see her. So anybody who knows anything or even a little bit about survivor victor victim or survivor mentality is, how can I tell people the horrible things this person did to me and yet still call them dad and still visit with them?
Right. Well,
During
you can kind of go into Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, there's a lot of it here. There's as we continue in and I reveal a lot of her family dynamics. It's to me painted a very clear, very accurate portrait of somebody who would be violent and violent toward themselves, violent towards others. Somebody who wouldn't think twice about being a perpetrator.
Right.
Um, During her 2006 parole hearing, the DA tells the board Brenda Spencer was psychotic and unfit to leave prison due to an episode of self mutilation. When a prison romance was broken up, Brenda etched into her chest, in ruins, forgiven and alone. A correction she made when the DA misinterpreted her misinterpreted the message as courage and pride. So during this meeting, the DA says, well, she is psychotic because when her and her girlfriend broke up, she took a paperclip and got it hot and used scarification on her chest to write that she's got courage and pride. And Brenda says that's not true. It's in ruins. You misread it. It says unforgiven and alone.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the difference between using scarification and jailhouse tattoos?
Nothing.
Is everybody who does something of self or some type of self harm while incarcerated, if all of them are unable to be released, we would never have anybody leave prison ever.
True.
In 2009, the parole board denied Brenda's petition for release once again, telling her it would be at least 10 years before she'd be considered again.
Wow.
And sadly, in February of this year, after 46 years in prison, Brenda Spencer was denied yet again, even with the presentation that Brenda's been nothing less than a model prisoner. She will be eligible for another parole hearing in 2028. So I'm going to bring up a picture. Okay. Or maybe not. So this is Brenda Spencer in 2006. She We'll get into why she made the comment she did. But even here you can see her stature is of only analogy I can truly think of is of a whipped dog. She loves this man. He's her father, but she hates what he's done. And it has created a situation that changed the lives of many, not even just her direct people, but as we've seen years later, created a situation of where angry kids, abused kids, bullied kids take a gun to school and annihilate as many people as they can.
Right.
So bring up another picture. So here's Brenda at 16 being escorted. This is after she's been arrested. Now, Robert Robb, the police officer that was injured, says, well, she came out in camouflage clothing. To me, in 1979, this is a typical teenager's. I mean, it could be a typical teenager now. Their
Right.
wardrobe.
That and that's what she when she came out of her house, this picture is supposedly what she was wearing.
Yes, that's what she was wearing.
That's not camouflage at all.
No, it's not tactical gear. It's nothing that they have described. It's corduroy pants, a black jacket, and a beanie. Normal teenage clothing. So this is what's happened in the aftermath. San Diego District Attorney Richard Sachs feels that Brenda is, was, and will always be a danger to society. Even faced with every positive and self improvement accomplishment, D.A. Sachs describes Spencer as strange, unbalanced, and disconnected from her mugshot even now. What do you think his motivation is for these sayings? This is 46 years later.
I don't know. Um because maybe there's a little bit of survivor's guilt. Excuse me, on his part. And he is, because didn't, if I'm not mistaken, didn't she previously shoot a BB gun or something at the school and get in trouble for it prior to
Yes.
this? So maybe he has a little bit of survivor's guilt. Like, he was forewarned that something was going to happen and he didn't help this girl. They were there previously. They saw the living situation. They knew the circumstances. You can't tell me that these police officers didn't have any sort of inkling when they talked to her the first time that she was being abused.
Right.
And they didn't do anything. And then this happened. So maybe there's a little bit of guilt there. And he's projecting it on her because he didn't do something, one, to save her. If he had done something the first time around and stepped in and helped this young woman, everyone would have been saved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
And
it's
I think
projecting.
I agree because I think there's a little bit of self-righteousness there to say, I put behind bars the very first school shooter, and since I put her there, I am never going to let her out. But on the same turn of the coin, what will it take, in your opinion, for Brenda to be paroled in the near future? So 2028, 3 years, she can go up again. What do you think it's going to take?
Honestly, I think it's just a waiting game. It's just going to have to be somebody that's there on her parole board or whatever they call it, that has some understanding of mental understanding of mental abuse and mental illness and all that kind of stuff, and be able to look at the person that she was then
Hmm.
mentally and compare it to the person that she is now mentally, and not be focused on that 16-year-old girl.
Very well said. Yes, I agree 1,000%.
I think she's done everything that she could do, and now it's just going to have to be somebody that can analyze that properly.
Someone with with enough influence to be able to say, hey, uh, DA Sachs, we understand how you feel, but at that time it'll be 49 years.
Mm-hmm.
But after 49 years, we don't feel she's a threat anymore. So it's going to take somebody with enough power politically, and enough influence within the correctional um, system to be able to override or to make him listen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the second is Crystal Hardy, a 10-year-old shot at Cleveland Elementary School, still now fears Brenda Spencer. Another student remembers Crystal pleading, "Am I going to die?" during February's parole hearing, told the board, "There's solace in knowing she's in prison." So this 10-year-old is shot in the hand. It goes through her wrist and miraculously does no damage. It does enough that she has to be in a cast, but there were no repercussions afterwards and no long term negative effects from being shot in the wrist. Is it traumatizing? Yes. Should she feel? Yes. That
I think that
it's
in this person's case that she obviously has PTSD, but she wasn't target. She wasn't she wasn't the person that Brenda was solely going after. Brenda didn't have any idea who she was. So for her to be this long afterwards and be only afraid of Brenda seems like she's just been people have been telling this person that growing up people have been telling Brenda did this to you, this person did this to you, because in just my experience with people with PTSD, they're not afraid of that one person, they're afraid of the event happening again.
right, right. And like we've said many times, and I'll repeat this every time PTSD comes up. PTSD is not a person who can't let go of a memory. PTSD is a memory that can't let go of a person.
Mm-hmm.
So there are like sights and sounds and smells that are going to trigger this. But what
And
you
when it's
said,
happening, they didn't know who was shooting at them.
no,
That's learned way after the fact. The memory, the trauma is the shooting. So you should be terrified that everywhere you go, you're going to be
there's going to be a
shot.
shooting. Yeah.
Exactly. Not
And you
specifically scared of one person. That's to me is a little bit of
grooming.
yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Because you said it perfectly that somebody had been shaping her into her belief because during the documentary, I Don't Like Mondays, um, Crystal Hardy is interviewed and she says, she's like, I was shot in the wrist and Brenda was shooting to kill. Those are also the same exact words of the DA who said this 16-year-old girl aiming this gun out her window was shooting to kill. That's a given. If anybody is shooting into a crowd, it's not for, you know, the fun of it. It's to create chaos. It's to be fatal. It's not, but to hear this come out of everybody's mouth and to hear it still come out of her mouth,
Right. Well, and
um, I,
that just shows what how malleable our memory is. When you're in a
yeah,
traumatic situation, and they teach police officers this now. They didn't back then. I'm not exactly sure when they started teaching them this, but police officers have to be very, very careful when they're talking to people that have just witnessed or been part of a traumatic event on how they ask questions and how they phrase things. They can't be like, "Do you know who Brenda is? Did you see her shoot you?" Because now that's implanted in somebody's memory. They have just
yeah,
altered their memory and it will forever be altered. They will
yeah.
never remember it properly.
Especially with a child, but anybody and somebody that has a position of authority, a district attorney, a sergeant police department, a detective, if they say to you, well, this is the person that shot you, immediately that imprint is on the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So now everything negative that you feel or you experience due to that due to that event, you're always going to say, well, Brenda did this
Right.
because
Well, and it causes so
that's
many
what you were told.
issues. Not only for the individual person, because now they're having to deal with this altered memory, but in an investigation, what if they're wrong? What if on the flip side they had the wrong person and it wasn't Brenda after all?
Mhm. Look at how many black men and women, but especially men, are serving prison sentences they probably may not or don't deserve simply because it looks like the person. It could be the person.
Yep. I would say more than half of any convicted black man before mid 90s, they're
Yeah.
innocent.
Oh, you wear a red beanie. Hey, the guy that murdered 3 women wore a red beanie and he was black. Oh, it's you. When
Right.
Hispanic as well too. There's so many crimes that are pinned on people of minority or people of a lower or poverty level because one, they don't have the resources truly to fight it. And two, it's easy to say to a witness, well, you said it was this type of person. Well, that is that person. And then the witness is going to immediately follow along.
Right.
Cam Miller, Cam Miller, the first child to be shot, um, he was shot in the abdomen, testifies at every parole hearing how being shot I'm sorry, he was shot in the back. Testifies how being shot in the back is, quote, the lasting tragedy playing in my mind every day. That right there is a complete admission of PTSD.
Right.
This,
So, and I know this is probably going to be a little bit controversial, but if we're requiring people to be let out on good behavior and paroled and served their time, and they have to show that they have worked on themselves, that they have learned from their mistakes, that they have done the hard work, then these people that are coming and testifying against them in these boards, they should also have to be like, you know what? I've gone through 30 years of therapy, and yet this still haunts me.
yes.
That to me is a more justified statement, and that's a more meaningful statement. Like, this was so tragic to somebody, but for somebody that perhaps hasn't tried to even heal from it is a little less persuasive. Not saying that
Well,
it wasn't a tragic event, but I feel like that should be part of it.
and parole boards should be made up of therapists,
Mm-hmm.
not just a psychiatrist, not just an evaluator, not just law enforcement, actual therapy, an actual therapist that has done therapy with the person looking to be paroled.
Right.
Um, Incidentally, Cam Miller also says that he has never been able to wear blue again because that was what he was wearing the day he was shot. Well, there
I
you
can
go. There's
understand that. Yeah, that's
PTSD
a
symbolism.
right. And
Yeah.
that's a more valid statement to me than I'm terrified of Brenda. He can
I'm
never
terrified of blue.
he could never wear blue again. That is more significant to the situation in my opinion, because he isn't associating Brenda as the sole problem. He can't look
Hmm.
at blue because it reminds him of what happened that day. He's not a
Hmm.
he's I don't know. To me that's a more valid statement than the
Right.
child.
Well, and let's throw in combat veterans just for a second. How many combat veterans hear fireworks and go, oh, uh, whichever enemy? We'll
Right.
just say, let's just use Germany because they're easy. Oh, the German that shot me. No, it's the popping sound reminds me of when I got shot.
Right. Right.
Monica Selvig, who was shot in the back and abdomen, described Brenda as a monster straight out of the movies. Now, I understand feeling that way. But what she says after, to me, and I want your opinion, of course, but it says to me again, this is a little bit of coaching. This is a little bit of impressing. Says, quote, I never heard her voice, but her glasses and red hair are creepy. You didn't see her the day that she shot you.
Right.
You didn't see her until months, days, years later. How are you making this association that she's like a horror movie monster?
It's just, and I can you want to hate the people that hurt you.
Yeah.
You're going to find any reason to.
Now, this part is a part that I have a lot of strong opinions on. But I want to hear your opinions on these next two individuals that are part of this case. Robert Robb still dreams of being a police officer, is plagued by hatred, depression, and paranoia that Brenda, if she is ever released from prison, that she will come after him to quote unquote finish the job. When asked that he would when asked what he would do if she was paroled, he stated, I'd get out my guns, I'd put them back together, and I would start carrying a weapon again. He's expressed several times his disappointment that the SWAT team that January day didn't blow up the house with her in it. Rob has spoken about his hardships and inability to get and keep gainful employment. But what do you really think it is? Do you really think it's this person, this incident?
I don't know. That's a hard one.
He is so plagued with hatred for Brenda Spencer that he, during the documentary, and then in some areas of research, had said she's the absolute reason my life is hell. She's the reason I can't be a cop anymore. She's the reason I'm scared. She's the reason that now I can't get a good job. Yes and no.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, clearly he has PTSD, but I don't know. I think if he was a police officer prior, he should have a little bit more empathy.
Well, and you would think he would have a little bit more of an understanding that Brenda didn't look at him and go, "Oh, look, that's a cop. I'm going to kill him. Oh, look, that's Officer Rob. I'm going to kill him."
Right.
Yes, her shots were measured. Yes, they were slow, but that's because anybody who has ever target shot or, or has had time in a gun range, it's not pop, 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 pop. They're measured pop, pop, because you're going for a target. Everybody was a target. And Brenda even said that when she looked out the window, the children looked like tiny like soldiers, look like tiny soldiers that were coming to get her.
That seems a little bit weird.
uh, I'm wondering if that, again, like the drug use, is just another reason, another way to say I did something unspeakable and I'm having a hard time understanding or having a hard time admitting that it was actually me as a person
Right.
who did this and not some type of psychosis. Kathy Wag and daughter Penny feels the loss of the man who cared enough about his students to greet each one every school day. Kathy had kept their home just as it was before Burton was killed. Penny has always been outspoken and at times sarcastic when talking about Brenda and her family. The disgust in her voice is unmistakable as she tells reporters, quote, 2 days after I went to collect my father's belongings, there was still blood on the cement where he had been shot. That's rough.
Yeah.
That's rough. You go, you're a young adult, you go to collect the last pieces of the last day of your father's life, and you still see the blood stain where he died.
Right.
But as we go on, you'll see that it's not so much just pain. There is so much hatred and anger as well, because she often calls Brenda dumb, weird, strange. Well, how many of us are not weird, strange, and at times dumb? How many of us say things that make sense in our heads at the moment, but then later as we think about it, didn't make a damn bit of sense at all?
Right.
Um, Penny goes on to tell the documentary crew that her brother's kids would often say, "No, Grandpa," and the older ones would ask her brother, was she going to come and kill them too?
Mm.
Here's another fear response. This is totally understandable, but the lack of I'm trying to find the way to because she's very bitter. So I believe in her grieving. She is in the stage of anger and she's just never been able to come out of that stage.
Right.
Um, she talks very negatively about Brenda in a kind of a physical aspect and also about her family, which, as we'll see, her family is probably about 95% responsible for the reason this happened. But the presence or presumed absence, no, excuse me, the absence or presumed absence of grief counseling seems to be the main reason this family, especially Penny, the daughter, is cynical and honestly bitter. Bitter to the point that she has a deep-seated hatred for Brenda. I don't know that therapy would have been helpful. Wouldn't hurt, but I don't believe from any research that I looked at that anybody in this family has had any kind of grief counseling. So
Probably not.
they all just kind of feed off each other, feed off themselves, and then they just, seether. They literally just sit and marinate in this anger.
Right.
Do you think possibly things would be different for Brenda if the families got mental health services as well? Not only Brenda, but the families of the victims and survivors did as well.
Yeah. I think so.
I think it'd be a totally different outcome to her parole hearings if everybody did get a chance or took the chance to see a psychiatrist.
I think so, yeah.
So it's okay in their minds for them to live in the same home, in the same condition as the day Burton died. So Kathy Burton Wags, Principal Burton Wags' widow, has kept their home exactly the way that it was in January of 1979. But yet, when one of the documentary crews asks, "What do you think about Wally Spencer continuing to live in his home?" um, they all thought, "Oh, that," they all express, "That's weird. That's really weird. Why would he must really like to be alone. Why would he want to stay in this house where this atrocity happened?"
Well, he was poor
Okay,
for one.
yes, they're economically not, and he was up until his death not economically in any type of situation that he could just up and get a new house.
Right.
I'm sure he would have loved to. I'm sure he would have loved it, gotten away from the notoriety, to get away from the notorious names that they called Brenda, and I'm sure him as well.
Right.
But not all of us can do that, and sometimes we have to stay in a situation that's not comfortable for us because we don't have the means.
Right.
They're very hypocritical. And that's the part about Principal Wag's family that kind of grades me the most, is they are absolutely bullies. They are the exact type of people that Brenda had been dealing with.
Mhm.
Because instead of looking at it from an objective point of view, they immediately just start in with making fun of her and criticizing everything about her.
Right.
Oh, and her family, but mostly her.
Right.
So let's consider Brenda's childhood and family as a possible insight into Brenda's mental health issues. The Spencer family dynamic is complex, if not completely shaped by neglect, abuse, and abandonment. But as we will soon discover, sexual abuse as well. Born in 1962, Brenda's infancy was normal and she was well cared for. But by the age of 5, Mother Dot moves out and divorces Father Wally because of infidelity. So Wally, good old Wally, tells his wife, "Will you let me come back if I go spend a year somewhere else?" And she found out he already had an apartment set up so that he could have lovers. So she said no, and completely divorced him, moved out of their home, and left the children with him. I don't understand a mother who just voluntarily leaves their kids.
Right. I don't either.
Dot would rent a home close to Wally's place, but never made any solid attempts to see any of her 3 children.
Wow.
Brenda describes interactions with Dot as cold, unsupportive, and distant. Quote, "I'd sit on the porch waiting for my mom, and then she would act like it was an inconvenience for me to be there." And even from Dot's own account said, quote, "I was at work counting money when the police called to tell me that the shooter was Brenda. They told me I needed to come down there. I said, no, I can't. I have a desk full of money." They ended up telling her, "So what? You need to come down here."
Right.
How many how many people, And guys, I absolutely welcome and implore you to comment on this. How many people are going to sit and hear, see, and find out your child has hurt and killed other people, and you're going to say, no, I got to stay at work. I'm counting money.
Right.
You telling me that desk doesn't have a lock on it? That door doesn't have a lock on it? You can't secure that? That's an excuse. Because when
Right.
Dot Spencer moved out, she washed her hands of her kids
Yeah.
and she went on to live a totally different life. Then you shouldn't have had kids.
Yeah. She wasn't mother material.
No. Brenda and Wally's relationship was headed down a destructive path from the moment Dot divorced Wally. So Dot said that in all of the times before her and Wally got separated and divorced, their family was happy, other than his um, infidelity. And she expresses remorse about um, abandoning her children and says, well, I think things would never have happened this way if I had just bit the bullet and stayed with him. We don't know this. There's no way anybody can know that.
Right.
Taking most of the furniture when she left created a very uncomfortable living condition for Brenda. Now, the way Wally describes it is the son and the daughter that are older than Brenda. Brenda is the baby. They had to have their own rooms for privacy reasons because they were teenagers. But his 5-year-old daughter can sleep on a dirty mattress on the floor with him
Up until she's 16.
until she's 16. So you mean to tell me in 16 years you could not, did not, or would not change that situation?
Right. I mean, I can see that at 5 years old and not being able to accommodate it at first, but eventually, like, you have to make that move.
So that to me says straight out, he orchestrated this sexual abuse. And here's a very good reason to feel that he orchestrated all of this. Um, Wally pushed his fascination with firearms, hunting, and target shooting onto Brenda. Brenda says, quote, I asked for a radio and I got a rifle, unquote.
Mm.
Brenda tells the parole board matter-of-factly, tried oh, I don't know what I went on a tangent there. Okay, I'll just edit that out. I asked for a radio and I got a rifle, Brenda tells the parole board matter-of-factly. While incarcerated, she started her sentencing out in a juvenile hall. In 1980, her roommate at the time runs away from her post-incarceration placement and goes to Wally's house. So here's a 17-year-old kid. She runs away from the halfway house that she's supposed to live in while she's on parole.
Uh-huh.
And she goes to her roommate's father's home.
Mm.
And Wally proceeded to get her pregnant.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And then they are told, you are either going to jail for sex with a minor or you're going to marry her and you're going to take care of that kid. So, of course, what did Wally do? He married her. But here's the thing, the uncanny resemblance this girl has to Brenda was so strong that neighborhood people were actually calling into the police department asking why Brenda had been paroled.
Huh.
She is an exact, or was an exact replica of his 16-year-old daughter.
Dang.
So this is, it just to me solidifies that he was sexually attracted to his own daughter. And when he couldn't get to her anymore, then he was going to have sex with her by proxy.
Mm.
When Wally finally grants an interview, is presented with Brenda's allegations, and he doesn't act very surprised. But of course, he denied everything.
Right.
If this is supposed to be something new to him, wouldn't he be more like, "What? What did she say? No, I never did anything like that." Wally just very simply he goes, "She said I touched her." And the interviewer says, "Well, yeah." He goes, "Nah, that never happened." And then when asked about his teenage bride, he just simply shuts them down and says, "I'm not talking."
Mm.
That's suspicious. That's very suspicious. Up until his death in 2016, Wally visited Brenda every Saturday. Brenda says, "We've become friends, but that's as far as it will go." Dot has never sent a letter, has never made a phone call, and has never visited her precious daughter in prison. And she she knew what was going on and she didn't want
Yeah.
to get involved.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Um, during her parole hearing, Brenda said it had been over 5 years since she had spoken to her mother. And when they asked if she wanted to visit with her mother, she had no comment.
I wouldn't either.
Is as we go through this and we wrap it up, now let me do that again. As we come to our conclusion, ask yourself, party people, is Brenda Spencer still a threat to the San Diego suburb? District Attorney thinks so. He thinks that Burton Wagg's family is more than justified in their hatred. Brenda's defense team, on the other hand, doesn't believe that she's a threat to anybody. She's never even attacked another inmate. This 46 years, and she's never been in trouble in prison. Regardless, in February of 2025, Brenda Ann Spencer, her parole is denied, but she can reapply again in 3 years.
Hmm.
So ask yourself, I keep saying that, as we wrap this episode up, ask yourself, what do you think? Is she the monster who gave birth to the nightmare that has inspired many, many other school shooters? Or is she the victim of a broken and neglected system that failed her, failed to see the warning signs, failed to see the mental health needs, failed to see the physical and sexual abuse? You guys be the judge.
Yep. I think you know where we stand.
And with that, catch us on the flip side.
Bye.